Before cities had names, before kings ruled, and before history was written, people across the world built places that still refuse to be ignored. They shaped stone for the dead, for the living, for the sky, and for memory, often without metal, writing, or machines. These are not isolated ruins. Together, they tell a deeper story about how humanity first learned to settle, to remember, and to give meaning to place. This is that journey, told through 13 ancient structures that still stand where they were never meant to last. The Tholos of El Romeral, Spain. On the plains of Antequera in southern Spain, not far from the massive dolmen of Menga, a different kind of monument lies beneath a low earthen mound. At first glance, it appears modest, but once inside, its construction reveals a profound shift in how prehistoric builders understood space, weight, and ritual. This is the Tholos of El Romeral, one of the earliest corbelled stone monuments in Western Europe, and a turning point in ancient architecture. The Tholos of El Romeral dates to around 2500–2200 BCE, during the Copper Age. This places it centuries after the great Neolithic dolmens nearby, yet clearly within the same sacred landscape. What El Romeral represents is not a break from the past, but an evolution, a new architectural idea layered onto an older tradition. Unlike passage tombs built with massive horizontal capstones, El Romeral uses small, carefully stacked stones to create a false dome, known as a corbelled vault. Each ring of stones projects slightly inward, rising gradually until the space closes at the top. No single stone carries the load. Weight is distributed evenly downward and outward. This technique marks a conceptual leap. Instead of relying on sheer mass, builders relied on geometry. The monument consists of a long stone corridor leading to a circular chamber, capped by the corbelled dome. Beyond this main chamber lies a second, smaller chamber, an unusual feature that suggests layered ritual use rather than simple burial. The corridor is narrow and controlled. Movement is deliberate. Light fades quickly as one advances inward. By the time the chamber is reached, the outside world has been fully left behind. Architecture here is not just structure, it is transition. Unlike many earlier tombs aligned with solar events, El Romeral is oriented toward the Peña de los Enamorados, the same distinctive mountain faced by the dolmen of Menga. This continuity is striking, even as building the techniques changed. The sacred relationship with the landscape remained constant. The mountain was not scenery, it was part of belief. Excavations uncovered human remains, pottery, and ritual objects, but not in large quantities. This suggests that El Romeral wasn't used for mass burial. Instead, it may have served specific individuals, lineages, or ceremonies tied to transition and renewal. The interior experience is intimate and controlled. The corbelled dome lowers perception of height, creating a contained, womb-like space. Sound behaves differently here. Silence feels amplified. This was not a space for crowds. It was a space for focus. What makes El Romeral especially important is what it foreshadows. The corbelling technique seen here would later appear in much grander form in Mycenaean Tholos tombs of Greece, structures built more than 1,000 years later. El Romeral shows that the architectural idea already existed in the Western Mediterranean long before those famous examples. This raises important questions about knowledge transmission. Did these ideas spread through long-distance contact, or did different cultures arrive independently at similar solutions? El Romeral sits at the center of that mystery. The construction materials also matter. Instead of massive monoliths, builders used smaller stones gathered locally. This reduced the need for extreme transport while increasing precision. Architecture became more modular, more adaptable, and potentially more symbolic. Unlike earlier monuments that overwhelm through scale, El Romeral impresses through control. Every stone serves a purpose. Every curve contributes to stability. The structure feels intentional in a new way. Over time, the Tholos was sealed and covered by its mound. Use ceased. The monument was not reused or repurposed extensively by later cultures. Its preservation comes from abandonment rather than adaptation. Standing inside the chamber today, one senses balance rather than weight. The ceiling does not threaten collapse. It feels settled, resolved. This quiet confidence is the monument's true achievement. As the opening chapter in this journey, the Tholos of El Romeral sets the tone for everything that follows. It marks the moment when prehistoric builders began to think not just about moving stone, but about shaping space. Here, architecture stops being purely megalithic and becomes architectural in the modern sense, governed by form, geometry, and intention. The builders left no names, no inscriptions, no explanations, but they left behind a new idea, one that would echo across the ancient world for centuries. In a quiet field in southern Spain, beneath a low mound of earth, the future of monumental architecture quietly took shape, stone by stone, curve by curve, and entirely by human design. Medrakan, Algeria. On a high plateau in northeastern Algeria, where the Ores Mountains rise from open steppe, a massive circular monument dominates the landscape. It's neither temple nor palace, neither fortress nor city. It stands alone, deliberate, symmetrical, and unmistakably funerary. This is the Medrakan, the oldest known royal mausoleum in North Africa, and a powerful statement of identity carved in stone. Medrakan dates to the late 4th or early 3rd century BCE, during the Numidian period, long before Roman control reached the region. At this time, Numidia was not a marginal land. It was a kingdom with its own elites, traditions, and political ambitions, positioned between the Mediterranean world and the African interior. The structure is monumental in scale. Medrakan rises more than 18 meters high and measures nearly 60 meters in diameter. Its form is immediately striking, a massive circular base crowned by a stepped conical roof. The entire monument is built from large limestone blocks laid with precision without mortar. The design blends multiple architectural traditions. The circular plan echoes earlier megalithic and tumulus traditions found across North Africa. The stepped upper structure reflects Mediterranean influences, particularly from the Greek world. Medrakan is not imitation, it is synthesis. At ground level, a series of engaged columns wraps around the monument's exterior. These are not functional supports. They are symbolic. Their presence suggests familiarity with classical architectural language, adapted to a distinctly local form. This fusion matters. Medrakan represents a moment when indigenous North African power expressed itself through architecture, not by copying foreign models, but by integrating them into an existing cultural framework. The monument functioned as a royal tomb, most likely for a Numidian king or ruling dynasty. Ancient sources later associated it with the ancestors of King Massinissa, the most famous Numidian ruler, though the structure itself predates his reign. Whoever was buried here, the message was clear. Authority was meant to endure. Unlike collective burial sites, Medrakan was exclusive. It marked separation between ruler and people, between elite memory and communal ancestry. This distinction reflects a shift in social organization, from shared ritual monuments toward individualized power. Yet the tomb's location is revealing. It's not hidden within a city or protected behind walls. It stands visible from great distance, anchoring authority to land rather than urban center. Power here was territorial, not civic. The interior chamber is relatively small compared to the monument's mass. Access is narrow and controlled, emphasizing containment rather than display. The dead were not meant to be seen. They were meant to be preserved. This imbalance between exterior scale and interior function is intentional. Medrakan wasn't built for the dead alone. It was built for the living, to be seen, remembered, and acknowledged across generations. Construction required immense labor. Quarrying, transporting, and shaping stone blocks of this size demanded organization, planning, and authority. This was not communal effort alone. It reflects centralized control and mobilization of resources. In this sense, Medrakan marks a turning point. Earlier monuments express shared belief. Here, architecture expresses rulership. Later, North African royal tombs, including the nearby Mausoleum of Mauritania, follow similar principles. Medrakan set the template: circular, monumental, symbolic, and enduring. Despite Roman expansion, Medrakan was never dismantled. It was respected, avoided, and preserved, even as new architectural traditions arrived. This continuity suggests that its meaning transcended political change. Standing at Medrakan today, the monument feels solid and closed. There's no invitation to enter, no processional path, no ritual, choreography. Meaning here is declarative, not experiential. This is architecture that speaks through presence alone. As the second chapter in this journey, Madrasan introduces a new theme: the rise of monumental funerary architecture tied to individual power. After communal tombs and evolving ritual spaces, we encounter a structure built to immortalize authority. Stone here is no longer only symbolic, it is political. The Numidian kings left no written histories carved into this monument, but they left scale, symmetry, and endurance. Through these, Madrasan continues to declare what it was always meant to say: a ruler ruled here, a lineage mattered, and power was intended to last beyond death. Long before Imperial Rome shaped North Africa, Madrasan stood as a reminder that sovereignty, memory, and architecture were already deeply intertwined, rising from the African plateau in stone and refusing to be forgotten. Mizora Stone Circle, Morocco. On a quiet plain in northern Morocco, not far from the Atlantic coast and the ancient trade routes of the western Mediterranean, a ring of stones rises from the earth. There is no enclosing wall, no temple, no inscription to guide interpretation, just a circle, wide, deliberate, and incomplete. This is the Mizora Stone Circle, one of the largest and least understood stone circles in North Africa, and a monument that stands at the intersection of myth, memory, and early power. Mizora, sometimes spelled Mizura, consists of a circular arrangement of roughly 170 standing stones, enclosing a central mound. The circle measures nearly 60 meters in diameter, placing it among the largest megalithic circles known anywhere. Many stones now lie fallen or broken, but enough remain upright to reveal the original design, a ring that once dominated the surrounding landscape. The monument is traditionally dated to the late Neolithic or early Bronze Age, likely between 3000 and 2000 BCE, though precise dating remains difficult. What is clear is that Mizora predates Roman influence in the region by millennia. It belongs to a prehistoric North Africa that is still poorly represented in popular histories. Local legend has long associated Mzora with Antaeus, the giant son of the earth in Greek mythology, said to have been buried here after being defeated by Hercules. While myth offers no archaeological evidence, its persistence matters. It shows that Mizora remained meaningful long after its builders were forgotten. At the center of the stone circle lies a low earthen mound. Early excavations suggested it may cover a burial, possibly of a high-status individual. This arrangement, a circular ring surrounding a central tomb, echoes patterns seen across Atlantic Europe, from Brittany to Britain, suggesting either long-distance cultural exchange or convergent ritual thinking. The stones themselves vary in size and shape. Some are tall and narrow. Others are squat and broad. One stone, larger than the rest, stands slightly apart from the circle. This outlier has been interpreted as a marker stone, possibly indicating orientation, status, or ritual focus. Orientation at Mizora remains debated. Some researchers suggest alignments with solar or lunar events. Others point to sightlines toward surrounding hills or significant landscape features. Unlike precise observatories such as Chanquillo, Mizora appears flexible rather than exact. It frames space more than it measures time. This flexibility may be intentional. Mizora does not enforce a single viewpoint or path. One can enter the circle from multiple directions. There is no obvious entrance. Participation here was likely communal and inclusive rather than controlled or hierarchical. The effort required to build Mizora was immense. Quarrying, transporting, and erecting hundreds of stones demanded organization and sustained cooperation. Yet there is no evidence of a nearby settlement large enough to suggest centralized authority. This points again to shared ritual motivation rather than imposed labor. Mizora's location reinforces this idea. It is not hidden, but it is not urban. It sits between zones, inland and coastal, local and connected. The site may have served as a regional gathering place, drawing communities together periodically rather than continuously. The circle's scale suggests that gatherings here were significant. Ceremonies may have involved large groups, seasonal events, or rites connected to death and ancestry. The central mound implies a focal point, but the ring itself distributes attention evenly around space. Unlike later monuments tied to kingship, Mizora does not proclaim individual authority. There are no symbols of rule, no separation between elite and common space. Meaning here emerges through collective presence. The stone circle tradition is rare in North Africa, making Mizora especially important. It shows that megalithic architecture was not confined to Europe or the Near East. Similar impulses arose along the southern Mediterranean, shaped by local conditions and beliefs. Later cultures encountered the monument and left it largely intact. Romans recorded legends but did not dismantle it. Medieval communities preserved stories but did not repurpose the stones extensively. This restraint suggests lingering respect, even as original meaning faded. Standing within the circle today, the sense of enclosure is subtle. The stones do not form a wall. The horizon remains visible. Sky dominates the space. Architecture here defines boundary without blocking connection. This openness distinguishes Mizora from enclosed tombs or fortified sites. It is a place to gather under the sky, not withdraw from it. As the third chapter in this journey, Mizora bridges worlds. It connects North Africa to broader megalithic traditions while remaining firmly rooted in its own landscape. It represents a moment before architecture became overtly political, when stone marked community rather than command. The builders left no names, no dates, no explanations, but they left a circle large enough to gather memory, myth, and movement into one place. Mizora does not explain itself, it endures, and in that wide ring of stone, open to wind, light, and sky, it preserves a rare chapter of human history, when meaning was shaped not through walls or towers, but through shared space and collective presence. Pentre Ifan, Wales. On a quiet hillside in Pembrokeshire, with the Prehistoric hills rising gently in the distance, a single stone monument stands exposed to wind, sky, and time. There's no mound to enclose it, no walls to guide entry, no path to dictate movement. Just a massive capstone balanced delicately on slender uprights. This is Pentre Ifan, one of the most iconic and enigmatic megalithic structures in Britain. Pentre Ifan dates to around 3500 BCE, during the Neolithic period, when farming communities were becoming firmly established across Britain. It belongs to a class of monuments known as portal dolmens, tombs characterized by large vertical stones supporting a single monumental capstone. Yet, Pentre Ifan is exceptional, even within this group. The capstone alone weighs an estimated 16 tons. It rises more than 3 meters above the ground, creating a dramatic sense of lift and exposure. The supporting stones are comparatively slim, giving the impression that the entire structure is improbably light, as if hovering rather than resting. This visual tension is deliberate. The builders understood balance, leverage, and load distribution with remarkable accuracy. The capstone's weight is carefully transferred through specific contact points, creating stability without massiveness. What appears fragile is, in fact, precisely resolved. Originally, Pentre Ifan was not meant to look this way. Archaeological evidence suggests that the stones once formed the entrance to a burial chamber covered by an earthen mound or cairn. Over millennia, that covering eroded or was removed, leaving the skeletal core exposed. What we see today is the monument's structural heart. This exposure fundamentally changes the experience. Instead of entering a dark chamber, visitors now encounter openness. Sky replaces earth, wind replaces enclosure. The tomb no longer hides the dead. It presents absence. Burials associated with portal tombs were typically collective, involving the remains of multiple individuals placed over time. These were not graves sealed after one use. They were revisited, reopened, and renewed. Death here was cyclical rather than final. The orientation of Pentre Ifan is also significant. The monument faces roughly north, toward the Prehistoric Hills, a landscape already sacred in Neolithic Britain. These hills are the source of the bluestones later transported to Stonehenge, linking Pentre Ifan indirectly to one of the most famous monuments in the world. This connection suggests shared ritual geography. Places mattered not only locally, but regionally. The dead were anchored to landscapes that extended beyond the immediate settlement. The simplicity of Pentre Ifan is deceptive. There are no carvings, no symbols, no decorative elements. Meaning is carried entirely through form, scale, and placement. Stone here does not tell stories. It creates presence. Standing beneath the capstone today, the space feels transitional. It is neither fully enclosed nor fully open. One is aware of weight overhead and sky beyond simultaneously. This ambiguity may reflect the monument's original purpose, a threshold between worlds. Unlike later monuments tied to elite power or centralized authority, Pentre Ifan shows no evidence of hierarchy. There is no separation between special and ordinary space. Anyone could approach, Anyone could stand beneath the stone. Ritual here was likely communal rather than controlled. The effort required to raise the capstone would have demanded cooperation, planning, and shared intent. Yet nothing about the structure suggests coercion. This was not architecture imposed from above. It was built through agreement. Over centuries, Pentra Ifan remained part of the landscape. Later communities did not dismantle it. Folklore grew around it, attributing supernatural qualities to its balance and endurance. The monument became a marker of continuity, a place already ancient in the medieval imagination. Its preservation today is due in part to its exposure. With no mound to quarry for material, the stones were left standing. What erosion removed, visibility protected. As the fifth chapter in this journey, Pentra Ifan represents a moment of restraint. After large communal sites and evolving ritual landscapes, we encounter a monument reduced to essentials: stone, balance, and place. It reminds us that meaning does not require complexity. Sometimes it emerges most clearly through simplicity. The builders of Pentra Ifan left no explanation of their beliefs, but they left a structure that still commands pause, still invites approach, still resists indifference. Here, on a quiet Welsh hillside, architecture does not overwhelm. It holds space, and beneath that poised capstone, heavy, silent, and improbably balanced, the Neolithic understanding of death, landscape, and continuity remains suspended between earth and sky, exactly as intended. Hilly Archaeological Park, Al Ain, United Arab Emirates. In the oasis city of Al Ain, where desert heat meets groundwater and date palms still grow as they have for millennia, a quiet archaeological park preserves one of the longest and most continuous records of human settlement in southeastern Arabia. Stone circles, mud brick houses, and communal tombs lie side by side, layered across time rather than separated by it. This is Hilly Archaeological Park, a landscape where early society, water management, and ritual architecture developed together. Hilly's significance lies not in a single monument, but in continuity. The site preserves evidence from the Neolithic period through the Bronze Age, roughly from the 5th millennium BCE to around 2000 BCE. Few places in Arabia show this depth so clearly. Here we can trace how small communities adapted to an arid environment and gradually organized themselves into more complex societies. At the heart of the park stands the Hilly Grand Tomb, a large circular stone structure dating to around 2500 BCE. Built during the Umayyad period, the tomb is over 12 meters in diameter and constructed from carefully fitted limestone blocks. Decorative reliefs depicting animals and human figures are carved into its exterior, rare examples of figurative art in early Arabian architecture. The tomb was communal. Human remains from dozens of individuals were placed inside over time, indicating collective burial rather than elite separation. Death here reinforced community rather than hierarchy. The scale of the tomb suggests shared investment and shared memory. Surrounding the tomb are the remains of domestic buildings. Rectangular mud brick houses with multiple rooms show clear planning. Walls are thick, floors plastered, and spaces differentiated for storage, living, and work. These were not temporary shelters. They were permanent homes. What made permanent life possible here was water. Hilly preserves some of the earliest evidence for Falaj-style irrigation systems, underground channels that carried groundwater to the surface with minimal evaporation. These systems transformed desert margins into sustainable agricultural zones. Date palms, cereals, and other crops could be cultivated reliably, supporting growing populations. This control of water marks a major shift. Survival was no longer dependent solely on rainfall or seasonal movement. People could stay, plan, build. Remember, the layout of the settlement reflects this stability. Houses cluster around shared spaces, pathways connect structures, storage areas indicate surplus. Social life here was organized around proximity and cooperation rather than defense. Unlike many early settlements elsewhere, Hilly shows no signs of fortification. There are no walls, towers, or gates. Security came from environment and social cohesion rather than military architecture. This absence is telling. It suggests a society confident in its systems and armed relationships. Artifacts recovered from Hilly reveal wide connections. Pottery styles link the site to other Umayyad communities across Oman and the UAE. Copper objects point to regional metallurgy and trade. Hilli was not isolated, it was part of a broader cultural network stretching across southeastern Arabia. Yet, despite these connections, Hilli retained a strong local identity. Architecture remains consistent. Building materials are local. Practices are adapted to oasis life rather than imported wholesale from elsewhere. The relationship between the living and the dead at Hilli is especially revealing. Tombs are not distant or hidden. They stand within the settlement landscape, visible reminders of ancestry and continuity. The dead remain present in daily life, reinforcing collective identity across generations. Over time, settlement patterns shifted. By the early 2nd millennium BCE, Hilli's prominence declined as regional dynamics changed. Trade routes shifted. Climate conditions evolved. Communities reorganized. The site was not destroyed. It was gradually left behind. Because of this, Hilli preserves a rare snapshot of early Arabian life without later overbuilding. Stone foundations remain readable. Tombs retain form. Irrigation channels trace forgotten water paths. Walking through Hilli today, the experience is calm and grounded. There's no monumental spectacle. Meaning emerges through arrangement, how homes, tombs, and water systems relate to one another. Hilli challenges the idea that early complexity emerged only in river valleys like the Nile or Mesopotamia. Here, in an arid landscape, people achieve permanence through innovation rather than abundance. Hilli Archaeological Park adds a crucial perspective. It shows that early civilization was not uniform. Different environments produced different solutions, equally sophisticated, equally intentional. Stone circles marked memory. Mud brick houses held daily life. Water channels sustained everything in between. The builders of Hilli left no written records, but they left infrastructure, systems designed to last, to be shared, and to support community rather than dominance. In the oasis of Al Ain, long before modern cities rose from the desert, people learned how to stay, not briefly, but for generations. And in that decision to remain, to manage water, to bury the dead together, and to build with care, Hilli preserves one of the clearest early expressions of settled life in Arabia: quiet, resilient, and deeply human. The stone circles of Senegambia, West Africa. Across the savannas and river valleys of Senegal and the Gambia, thousands of laterite stones rise from the earth in carefully arranged circles. They are not isolated monuments. They appear again and again, spread across a vast region, forming one of the largest megalithic landscapes on earth. This is the stone circles of Senegambia, a funerary tradition that endured for more than 1,000 years and reshaped how communities remembered their dead. The stone circles of Senegambia date roughly from the 3rd century BCE to the 16th century CE. This long span is critical. These monuments were not the product of a single culture or moment. They represent continuity, a shared architectural language passed down, adapted, and repeated across generations. More than 1,000 stone circles are known, organized into clusters along the Gambia River and its tributaries. Among the most studied are sites like Wasu in the Gambia and Sine and Gaint in Senegal. Each circle typically consists of 8 to 24 upright stones, set with precision, forming near-perfect rings. The stones are made of laterite, an iron-rich rock that hardens when exposed. Quarrying and shaping laterite requires planning and labor, but it is durable once set. The builders chose a material that would endure under open sky and seasonal rain. At the center of many circles lie burial pits. Excavations have revealed human remains, pottery, metal objects, and personal ornaments. These were not single interments. Tombs were reopened repeatedly, with new burials added over time. The circles mark lineage rather than individual death. This collective use is key. The monuments did not commemorate one ruler or elite. They anchored community memory. Each new burial reinforced connection to ancestors and land. Some circles include a taller stone, often placed to the east. This headstone may have marked ritual orientation or status within the cemetery. Others include paired stones or adjacent monuments, suggesting variation within a shared tradition rather than strict uniformity. The layout of these sites suggests intentional placement within landscape. Circles often occupy elevated ground near watercourses, visible, accessible, and symbolically charged. They were meant to be seen and returned to, not hidden away. Unlike enclosed tombs elsewhere, The Senegambian circles are open. Sky, wind, and weather remain present. Ritual here unfolded under open air, reinforcing continuity between the living world and ancestral space. The labor required to construct these cemeteries was significant. Stones had to be quarried, transported, shaped, and erected upright with precision. Yet there is no evidence of centralized states or coercive authority behind their construction. This points to communal organization sustained over centuries. The persistence of form across such a long period suggests that the circles carried stable meaning. Even as societies changed, converted to Islam, or reorganized politically, the tradition endured, adapted, but not erased. Eventually, the practice ended. New religious frameworks transformed burial customs, but the circles were not dismantled. They remained embedded in landscape, respected even when no longer used. Standing among them today, the effect is quiet and rhythmic. Stone follows stone, circle follows circle. No single monument dominates. Meaning accumulates through repetition. The stone circles of Senegambia expand the story beyond Eurasia and the Mediterranean. They show that monumental memory was not rare. It was global. Here, architecture didn't rise upward into towers or pyramids. It spread outward, across land, across generations, across belief systems. The builders left no inscriptions, no dynastic names, no written explanations. What they left instead was pattern, a way of remembering that did not depend on permanence of rule, but on continuity of practice. In Senegambia, stone was not used to separate the dead from the living. It was used to keep them close, visible, present, and remembered. And in those enduring circles, spread quietly across West Africa, one of humanity's longest-running traditions of collective memory still stands, open to sky, grounded in earth, and shaped entirely by human hands. The Dolmen of Soto, Spain. In the rolling countryside of Andalusia, far from dramatic cliffs or mountain peaks, a long earthen mound stretches quietly across the land. From the outside, it gives little away, but beneath the soil lies one of the most complex and symbolically rich megalithic monuments in Europe. This is the Dolmen of Soto, a structure that transforms stone into narrative and burial into memory carefully inscribed. The Dolmen of Soto dates to around 2500 BCE, during the late Neolithic period. It belongs to the tradition of passage tombs, yet it immediately stands apart. Where many tombs rely on scale or alignment to impress, Soto communicates through length, detail, and repetition. The monument consists of a long stone corridor, nearly 21 meters in length, leading into a circular chamber at the far end. This makes it one of the longest known passage tombs on the Iberian Peninsula. Movement through Soto is not brief. It is gradual. The builders clearly intended time and distance to be part of the experience. As one advances into the passage, the outside world disappears slowly. Light fades, sound dulls, the body adjusts to enclosure. Architecture here is not static. It unfolds. What makes the Dolmen of Soto exceptional is what covers its stones. Many of the upright slabs lining the passage are engraved with symbols, spirals, zigzags, cup marks, weapon-like forms, and anthropomorphic figures. These carvings are not decorative afterthoughts. They are deliberate, repeated, and positioned at specific heights and locations. Some engravings are placed where torchlight would catch them during movement. Others appear only in deeper shadow. This suggests that the carvings were meant to be encountered sequentially, not absorbed at once. Meaning here was revealed through progression. The imagery itself resists simple interpretation. Spirals may reference cycles, movement, or transformation. Zigzags may evoke water, energy, or boundaries. Weapon-like shapes suggest protection or authority. Human figures, though stylized, introduce presence, watchers within stone. Unlike later writing systems, these symbols do not record events. They encode ideas. The tomb becomes a space not just of burial, but of communication. Excavations at Soto revealed human remains placed collectively, along with pottery, stone tools, and offerings. Like many Neolithic tombs, Soto was not sealed after a single use. It was reopened, revisited, and renewed. Each return reinforced connection between the living and the dead. The chamber at the end of the passage is modest in size, emphasizing containment rather than grandeur. This reinforces the idea that the journey mattered more than the destination. The act of entering, walking, and encountering symbols was central to ritual. Orientation also matters. The passage aligns roughly east-west, allowing morning light to penetrate the entrance at certain times of year. While not as precise as solstice-focused monuments, this alignment suggests awareness of solar movement and its symbolic association with renewal. The dolmen of Soto was originally covered by a long mound, now partially eroded. This mound would have concealed the structure entirely, leaving only subtle surface indication. The tomb was not meant to be seen constantly. It was meant to be accessed intentionally. This separation between exterior invisibility and interior complexity is significant, meaning here was reserved for participants, not passersby. Knowledge was restricted, not public. The effort required to construct Soto was immense. Large stone slabs had to be quarried, transported, erected, and engraved, all without metal tools. Engraving alone would have taken extraordinary time and skill. This investment points to belief systems strong enough to justify prolonged labor. Unlike elite tombs tied to individual rulers, Soto shows no signs of hierarchy. The collective nature of burial and the shared symbolic language suggest community-based ritual rather than centralized authority. Over time, the tomb fell out of use. Soil accumulated, stones shifted, its memory faded into the landscape. When it was rediscovered and excavated in the 20th century, its carvings revealed a level of symbolic expression previously underestimated in Iberian Neolithic societies. Standing inside the passage today, the experience is intimate and restrained. The engravings feel close. The ceiling presses downward. There's no spectacle, only presence. Stone here does not dominate. It listens. The dolmen of Soto adds a crucial dimension. It shows that early monuments were not only about mass or alignment, they were also about meaning encoded directly into material. Here, stone speaks, not through size, but through sign. The builders left no written language, but they carved thought into walls. They transformed a burial place into a narrative corridor, where belief, memory, and movement became inseparable. The people are gone. The rituals have ended, but the symbols remain. And in that long, quiet passage beneath the Andalusian earth, one of humanity's earliest visual languages still waits, carved in stone, revealed step by step, exactly as its builders intended. Dolmen de la Pastora, Spain. On the Algarve Plateau, west of modern Seville, beneath a long, low mound of earth, a narrow stone passage leads deep into darkness before opening into a circular chamber. The experience is deliberate, controlled, and disorienting. Distance replaces height. Duration replaces spectacle. This is the Dolmen de la Pastora, one of the longest and most carefully orchestrated funerary monuments of the Iberian Copper Age. The Dolmen de la Pastora dates to roughly 3,000–2,500 BCE, a period of rapid social change in southern Iberia. Communities were growing larger, trade networks expanding, and ritual architecture becoming more specialized. La Pastora belongs to a dense megalithic landscape that includes other major monuments, yet it stands apart through one striking choice: extreme length. The stone passage extends for nearly 43 meters, among the longest known in prehistoric Europe. This is not a corridor meant simply to connect outside to inside. It is a journey. Moving through it takes time, effort, and intention. Light diminishes gradually. The outside world recedes step by step. The passage is built from upright slabs and capped with stone lintels, carefully aligned to maintain a consistent, narrowing perspective. The floor slopes gently, guiding movement inward. Architecture here choreographs the body. Entry is slow. Reversal feels consequential. At the end of the passage lies a circular chamber constructed using corbelled stonework, a tholos form similar to, but more refined than, earlier Iberian examples. Stones rise inward in overlapping rings, creating a contained dome space. Unlike monuments that overwhelm through mass, La Pastora encloses through geometry. This combination, an exceptionally long passage leading to a compact corbelled chamber, is intentional. The builders created contrast. Movement is extended. Arrival is contained. Time expands, then collapses. Orientation adds another layer. Unlike most Iberian passage tombs, which tend to face east toward the rising sun, Dolmen de la Pastora is oriented westward. This reversal is significant. West is the direction of sunset, disappearance, and closure. Symbolically, it aligns with death rather than renewal. This choice suggests a ritual emphasis not on rebirth, but on transition and finality. The journey inward mirrors the sun's descent. The monument becomes a map of passage rather than return. Excavations revealed limited human remains and offerings, suggesting that La Pastora wasn't used for repeated mass burial. Instead, it may have served select individuals or specific rites. Access appears controlled. This was not a communal tomb in the broad sense. The monument's placement within the landscape reinforces this idea. While visible as a mound, its entrance is subtle. The structure does not advertise itself. Knowledge of its presence and its interior would have been restricted to those initiated into its use. Construction demanded extraordinary labor. Stones had to be quarried, transported, erected, and precisely aligned. Maintaining a straight, stable passage of this length without collapse required planning and technical understanding. This was not experimental architecture, it was confident. The relationship between La Pastora and nearby monuments is revealing. While other tombs in the region emphasize decoration or scale, La Pastora emphasizes sequence. It suggests a diversification of ritual practice within the same cultural sphere. Different monuments for different meanings. Over time, the dolmen was sealed and covered. Use ended. The mound softened into the landscape. Later communities did not dismantle it. Its preservation owes much to its concealment. Entering the passage today, the effect remains powerful. The walls draw inward. Sound dulls. Light narrows to a distant rectangle behind you. The chamber ahead feels inevitable rather than inviting. This is architecture that does not persuade, it guides. The Dolmen de la Pastora marks a turning point. After communal tombs and symbolic engravings, we encounter ritual architecture that prioritizes experience over display. Meaning is not carved on stone. It is enacted through movement. Here, belief is not explained. It is felt. The builders left no images, no symbols, no written traces of intention. What they left instead was distance, carefully measured and deliberately imposed. The dead lay at the end of a long path. The living walked it, and the space between became the ritual. Beneath the quiet fields of Andalusia, Dolmen de la Pastora still holds that distance intact, a silent corridor of stone, preserving one of humanity's earliest architectural expressions of the Gaintija temples, Gozo, Malta. On the island of Gozo, where limestone rises close to the surface and the Mediterranean surrounds every horizon, two massive stone structures stand side by side on a low ridge. Their walls are thick, their stones immense, and their layout unmistakably intentional. Long before pyramids rose in Egypt or stone circles spread across northern Europe, these temples were already ancient. This is the Gaintija temples, among the oldest freestanding stone monuments ever built by human hands. The Gaintija temples date to around 3600–3200 BCE, during Malta's temple period. This places them over 5,500 years old. When they were constructed, there was no metal on the island, no wheeled transport, and no beasts of burden. And yet, some of the stones used here weigh more than 50 tons. The name Gaintija comes from the Maltese word for giant. Local tradition long held that only giants could have built such a place. That belief persisted for centuries, not as folklore alone, but as an acknowledgement of scale that defied ordinary explanation. The complex consists of two adjoining temples enclosed within a common perimeter wall. Each temple follows a distinctive cloverleaf plan, with a sequence of curved chambers opening off a central axis. This repeated form is not accidental. It reflects a shared architectural language refined over generations. The outer walls are built from enormous limestone blocks, some taller than a standing human. Inside, smaller stones were used to create smoother surfaces and tighter curves. This contrast reveals careful planning. Brute mass on the exterior, controlled space within. Movement through Gaintija is deliberate. Narrow entrances restrict access. Chambers unfold one by one, guiding the body inward. These were not open gathering halls. They were ritual interiors, designed for controlled participation rather than public spectacle. Altars carved from single blocks of stone appear within the chambers. Some bear spiral motifs and low-relief decoration. These symbols recur across Maltese temple sites and are widely interpreted as references to cycles of life, fertility, and renewal. Animal remains found at Gantija indicate that offerings and feasting formed part of ritual activity. Sheep, goats, and cattle were consumed here, likely during ceremonial events tied to seasonal rhythms. Ritual was not abstract. It involved food, bodies, and repetition. Light also played a role. Temple entrances are generally oriented toward the southeast, allowing morning sunlight to penetrate the interior at certain times of year. Illumination would have been brief and selective, emphasizing particular spaces rather than flooding the entire structure. Despite their age and scale, the Gantija temples show no evidence of defensive use. There are no walls designed for protection, no elevated watch points, no signs of conflict. These were not places of refuge. They were places of gathering around belief. What makes Gantija especially important is what surrounds it, or rather, what does not. There are no palaces, no elite residences, no administrative buildings. The temples dominate the landscape alone. Power here appears ritual, not political. This challenges long-held assumptions about early monumentality. At Gantija, architecture was mobilized not by kings or states, but by shared belief strong enough to sustain construction over centuries. The society that built these temples eventually disappeared. By around 2500 BCE, Malta's temple culture collapsed abruptly. The reasons remain debated: environmental stress, resource depletion, social change. What is clear is that the temples were not reused or adapted by later cultures. They were abandoned and left standing. This abandonment preserved them. Unlike sites rebuilt repeatedly, Gantija remains structurally intact, its meaning frozen at the moment its builders walked away. Standing inside the temple chambers today, scale becomes intimate rather than overwhelming. Curved walls close in, sound softens. The massive stones no longer feel external. They define space from within. This inward focus is key. Gantija was not meant to impress from afar. It was meant to shape experience once entered. The Gantija temples mark one of humanity's earliest moments of architectural confidence, when stone was no longer stacked for survival alone, but arranged to structure belief. Here, people invested extraordinary effort into places that produced no food, offered no defense, and served no ruler. They built because meaning demanded form. The builders left no writing, no names, no explanations. But they left a space so deliberate, so enduring, that it reshaped how we understand the origins of monumental architecture. On a small Mediterranean island, long before history had a voice, humans raised stone into order and proved that belief alone could move mountains. Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, Malta. Beneath a quiet residential neighborhood in modern Paola, Malta, an entire prehistoric world lies hidden underground. There are no visible walls above ground, no standing stones marking its presence. The entrance descends suddenly into darkness, into carved chambers that multiply and deepen with each level. This is the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, the only known subterranean temple complex from the prehistoric world, and one of the most extraordinary ritual spaces ever created. The Hypogeum dates to roughly 4000-2500 BCE, overlapping with Malta's temple period, and making it contemporary with sites like Gantija and Tarxian. Yet unlike those freestanding monuments, Hal Saflieni was not built upward. It was carved downward, excavated entirely from solid limestone using stone and bone tools. The scale of this undertaking is difficult to overstate. The complex spans 3 levels, descending more than 10 meters underground, with chambers, corridors, and niches carved with remarkable precision. Walls curve smoothly. Doorways echo architectural forms seen above ground. Stone here was not merely removed, it was shaped. The upper level appears to have been the earliest. Originally, natural caves expanded into ritual use. As generations passed, deeper levels were carved deliberately, creating increasingly controlled and symbolically charged spaces. The deeper one descends, the more refined the architecture becomes. This progression matters. Movement through the Hypogeum is not random. It is hierarchical. Entry is wide. Descent is gradual. Space becomes restricted, darker, and quieter. Architecture here enforces transition, from outside to inside, from living to ancestral, from surface to underworld. The Hypogeum functioned primarily as a collective burial site. Excavations revealed the remains of over 7,000 individuals placed within its chambers over centuries. Bodies were arranged, moved, and revisited. Death here was not final disposal. It was part of an ongoing relationship. But the hypogeum was not merely a tomb. Its architecture reveals ritual intention beyond burial. Some chambers are shaped to resemble above-ground temples, complete with trilithon doorways carved directly into rock. This imitation suggests continuity, the same sacred forms, translated into the earth. One chamber in particular, known as the Oracle Room, demonstrates an extraordinary understanding of acoustics. A niche carved into the wall amplifies sound at a specific frequency. When a voice resonates here, vibrations travel through the stone, filling multiple chambers simultaneously. This effect is not accidental. The carving is precise, the resonance is repeatable. Sound was part of ritual. In a space where light was minimal, sound would have carried authority. Chanting, speaking, or ritual utterance could transform the entire complex into a vibrating chamber. Belief here was not only seen or imagined, it was felt physically. Decoration within the hypogeum reinforces this interpretation. Walls bear red ochre spiral motifs, painted directly onto stone. Spirals recur throughout Maltese temple art and are widely associated with cycles, transformation, and continuity. Here they appear in the deepest chambers closest to the dead. Stone altars, niches, and carved basins appear throughout the complex. These features indicate offerings, ceremonies, and repeated use. This was not a sealed necropolis. It was an active ritual center. The hypogeum also reveals a worldview deeply concerned with balance. Above ground, temples interacted with sky and sun. Below ground, the hypogeum interacted with earth, darkness, and resonance. Together, they formed a complete sacred system. Importantly, there's no evidence of elite separation within the hypogeum. Burials were collective. Space was shared. This suggests that access was not restricted to rulers or priests alone. Ritual authority here appears communal rather than hierarchical. At some point around 2500 BCE, use of the hypogeum ended. Like other Maltese temples, it was abandoned rather than destroyed. The entrance was sealed. Memory faded. The underground world slept beneath the layers of later settlement. It was rediscovered by chance in 1902 during construction work. What followed was one of the most significant archaeological revelations of the 20th century. Because of its fragility, access is now strictly limited, preserving the site by keeping it mostly unseen. Standing inside the hypogeum today, silence feels heavy. Sound behaves differently. Space feels compressed and intentional. There's no natural light. Time loses reference. This is architecture that removes the sky. Halsaflieni represents an extreme inversion of monumentality. Instead of rising stone toward heavens, humans here carve belief into the earth itself. They created a space where the dead, the living, sound, and stone converged in darkness, not to hide belief, but to deepen it. The builders left no writing, no inscriptions, no explanation, but they left form, resonance, and descent. And beneath the streets of modern Malta, in chambers carved 5,000 years ago, the hypogeum still holds its silence. A reminder that some of humanity's most powerful sacred spaces were never meant to be seen from afar, but entered slowly, carefully, and only by those who knew where to descend. Nap of Howard, Orkney, Scotland. On the windswept island of Papawestre in Orkney, two low stone buildings sit close to the edge of the sea. There are no walls around them, no monuments announcing importance, just thick stone structures shaped by weather, salt air, and time. Yet these buildings represent one of the earliest known permanent farmsteads in northern Europe. This is Nap of Howard, a quiet site that reveals how ordinary life first became settled, structured, and enduring. Nap of Howard dates to around 3700–2800 BCE, placing it firmly within the Neolithic period. This makes it older than Stonehenge and contemporary with the earliest phases of Skara Brae nearby. Unlike ceremonial monuments or tombs, Nap of Howard is domestic. It is architecture built not for ritual display, but for living. The site consists of two adjacent stone houses connected by a narrow passage. Each structure follows a similar plan. Thick stone walls, a single entrance, a central hearth, and stone-built furniture, beds, shelves, and storage spaces carved directly into the walls. Timber was scarce in Orkney, so stone replaced wood entirely. This use of stone for everyday life is crucial. It signals a decision to stay. Temporary shelters would not justify such effort. Nap of Howard reflects commitment to place, a willingness to invest labor into permanence despite harsh climate and isolation. The walls are massively thick, providing insulation against cold winds and winter storms. Entrances are low and narrow, reducing heat loss and limiting exposure. The buildings sit slightly recessed into the ground, using earth itself as protection. Architecture here is environmental intelligence rather than display. Inside, the layout is practical and symbolic. The hearth occupies the center, the heart of domestic life. Stone beds line the walls, likely separated by household roles or age. Storage spaces indicate surplus and planning. This was not subsistence living alone. It was managed living. Animal bones and plant remains found at the site show a mixed economy. The inhabitants farmed barley, kept cattle and sheep, fished coastal waters, and gathered seabirds and shellfish. Life here was seasonal but stable, tied to land and sea together. Unlike later villages, Knap of Howard does not show signs of expansion or hierarchy. There are no additional buildings crowding the site. This suggests a small household unit rather than a dense community. The scale is intimate, yet its influence is broader than its size suggests. Knap of Howard represents a model, one that would later expand into larger Neolithic villages like Skara Brae. The architectural principles seen here would be repeated, refined, and multiplied. The proximity of the houses suggests cooperation rather than isolation. Shared walls and passages indicate coordinated living. These were not independent huts. They were connected units, socially as well as physically. Importantly, there is no separation between ritual and domestic space. Unlike later periods where temples and tombs dominate attention, here daily life itself was central. Meaning was not carved into stone monuments. It was lived through routine, repetition, and care. The coastal location adds another layer. The houses sit dangerously close to eroding cliffs, suggesting that the shoreline has retreated since Neolithic times. This proximity indicates reliance on marine resources and acceptance of environmental risk. Eventually, the site was abandoned. The reasons remain unclear. Environmental change, shoreline erosion, or social reorganization may have played roles. What matters is how it was left. The structures were not dismantled. They were simply vacated. Sand and soil gradually filled the interiors, sealing the stonework. This natural burial preserved the houses in remarkable condition. When they were excavated in the 20th century, walls, hearths, and furniture were still visible. Standing inside, Knap of Howard today, the experience is quiet and grounded. The ceiling is low. The walls close in. One becomes aware of scale measured to human need, not ambition. This intimacy is the site's power. Knap of Howard shifts focus away from tombs, temples, and cosmic alignment. It brings us into the earliest moments of ordinary permanence, when humans decided not just to gather or worship together, but to live together year after year. Here, architecture is not symbolic first. It is practical first, and meaningful because of that. The builders left no carvings, no myths in stone. What they left was structure, walls that held warmth, spaces that organized life, and a plan that made staying possible. In the far north, on an exposed island, long before history recorded names or events, people learned how to make home permanent, and in those thick stone walls overlooking the sea, the beginning of settled life in northern Europe still stands, modest, resilient, and deeply human. Kirokitia, the circular houses, Cyprus. On a limestone ridge overlooking the Moroni River in southern Cyprus, a cluster of low, circular stone houses rises from the earth. There are no straight streets, no rectangular rooms, no monumental temples dominating the view. Instead, space curves inward. Walls enclose gently. Movement is contained and deliberate. This is Kirokitia, one of the best preserved Neolithic settlements in the Eastern Mediterranean, and a rare window into how early communities organized daily life, belief, and identity around the home itself. Kirokitia dates to roughly 7,000 6000 BCE, placing it among the earliest fully sedentary villages in the region. This was a moment when humans were still learning what permanent life meant, socially, architecturally, and psychologically. Kirokitia does not show experimentation. It shows confidence. Its forms are consistent, repeated, and refined. The settlement is composed almost entirely of circular houses built from stone foundations and mud brick upper walls. Roofs were likely flat or gently domed, constructed from timber, reeds, and packed earth. Each house stands close to the next, yet retains its own enclosed space. The choice of circular architecture is significant. Circles distribute weight evenly, resist collapse, and eliminate corners where stress accumulates. But beyond engineering, the circle shapes experience. There's no front or back, no hierarchy of walls. Space is shared equally. Inside each house, a central hearth anchors domestic life. Around it are raised platforms used for sleeping, working, and storage. Stone benches and niches line the walls. These are not improvised interiors. They are planned, repeated, and standardized. Daily life unfolded inward, not outward. Unlike later villages with courtyards and streets, Kirikitiya turns the household into the primary social unit. Interaction occurred at thresholds, rooftops, and shared pathways between houses rather than in public squares. Burial practices reinforced this focus. The dead were buried beneath the floors of houses, often in tightly flexed positions. Ancestors remained within the domestic space, physically present beneath the daily activity. Memory here was not abstract, it was literal. This integration of living and dead suggests a worldview centered on continuity rather than separation. The house was not just shelter, it was lineage. The settlement itself was enclosed by a substantial stone wall, one of the earliest known defensive structures in the region. Access points were limited, movement in and out was controlled. This wall marks a critical shift, the recognition of community boundaries. Yet within those boundaries, there's no evidence of hierarchy. Houses are similar in size and form. There are no elite residences, no central authority buildings, no monumental focal points. Equality appears architecturally enforced. Economically, Kirikitiya's inhabitants practiced mixed subsistence. They cultivated cereals, herded sheep and goats, hunted wild game, and gathered plant resources. Stone tools were finely made, indicating skilled craftsmanship. Obsidian imported from Anatolia reveals long-distance connections. Despite these connections, the community remained culturally distinct. Architectural style was maintained with little variation over centuries. This suggests strong social norms governing how space should be built and used. Water management also played a role. The settlement's elevated position protected it from flooding while maintaining access to the river below. Storage facilities indicate planning beyond immediate need. This was not survival at the edge. It was managed stability. Over time, houses were rebuilt on the same spots. Old walls were respected. Burials were preserved. The village grew through replacement rather than expansion. Memory accumulated vertically rather than horizontally. Eventually, around 6000 BCE, Kirikitiya was abandoned. The reasons remain debated. Climate shifts, disease, social change. What is clear is that the departure was not violent. The settlement was left intact. Soil gradually filled the houses. Stone walls remained. The village was sealed by time rather than destroyed by it. Standing among the reconstructed houses today, scale becomes immediately human. Walls rise to shoulder height. Spaces feel close, personal, contained. This is architecture measured to the body, not to power. Kirikitiya challenges the assumption that early sedentary life was chaotic or primitive. Here, people organized space with clarity, discipline, and shared values long before writing or formal governance. Kirikitiya represents a foundational moment. After monuments and tombs, we encounter architecture of everyday permanence, a society built from homes rather than symbols. The builders left no carvings explaining belief, no monuments declaring authority. What they left was form, repeated, consistent, and lived in. The circle was their answer, and in those circular stone houses overlooking a Cypriot river valley, one of humanity's earliest experiments in settled communities still stands. Quiet, ordered, and deeply intentional, reminding us that civilization did not begin with rulers or monuments, but with how people chose to live together.